How's everybody doing today? Today we're going to talk about crafting a bulletproof resume. There's a lot of information here, and some of it you actually have to work through on your own. So I'm going to tell you about it. It's a longer section, but when we're done here, I want you to go to the resource section. I've got 2 workbooks on there. They're both very detailed and very good. First one is going to help you put together your resume, all the things you should be looking for, questions you should be asking yourself before you start. The second one is a book of templates of different types of resumes, as well as different types of cover letters and thank you letters. So make sure you go to the resource section. They really go hand in hand. Listening is one thing, but you really learn this by doing it. Anyway, our quote of the day. In the depth of winter, I finally learned that within myself lay an invincible summer. Albert Camus. Why is it so hard to get a response to your resume? And what can you do about it? Is there anything more frustrating or confusing than writing a resume? You spend hours perfecting every word, agonizing over what to include, trying to decipher all the conflicting advice you've heard from friends and family and web articles and the so-called experts, most of whom don't seem to really agree. But when you're finally done and you send your resume off for the perfect job, what do you hear back? Crickets. No response. Nothing. No one ever calls. No one ever writes. I'm left wondering, what's wrong with me? What did I do wrong? Now the good news is you're not the problem. The problem is the system. And the fact that you don't yet understand it. You haven't had a peek behind the curtain to see how hiring decisions are actually made. But once you understand that, everything else is just going to fall right into place. You're going to be able to write a resume that gets a response without even thinking about it, regardless of your level, background, or industry. So let's begin by giving you a clear picture of exactly why it's so difficult to get a response to your applications, and exactly what you need to do to catapult your resume top of the pile. Now, the first thing you need to understand is the best candidates are not the ones that get hired. I've been interviewing people for over 25 years, and before becoming a coach, I interviewed hundreds of people. I don't fool myself that I always found the best candidate. What I found were the candidates with the best resumes. Now, they didn't necessarily have the strongest background, they didn't always have perfect experience. However, they did know how to present their resumes in order to do 2 things. And the first is to get past the automated screening systems, or what I call the robots. And the second is to appeal directly to the concerns of the hiring manager. I'm going to give you a little scenario here. It's a little dialogue between a hiring manager trying to fill a position. Now, Ed's an investment manager who's looking to hire a dedicated social media manager. He desperately wants to make the right decision. His team is understaffed and his workload keeps mounting. He's excited about getting some much-needed help. So as he starts to wade through resumes, another possibility occurs to him. He starts becoming concerned about making the wrong choice. It's happened before. It wouldn't be the first time that a seemingly wonderful candidate turned out to be underqualified, or worse yet, lazy. Now, Ed knows that if he makes a mistake, he's going to fall even further behind and his life's going to get harder, not easier. So he doesn't relish explaining to his bosses why the new social media manager hasn't had any impact on sales. So he starts to get nervous and doesn't really see any way to sort out good candidates from bad. All the resumes are pretty much alike, bland, repetitive, conformist. There are a lot of dynamic self-starters and highly motivated leaders. But these generalities tell Ed nothing. The problem is that most resumes do not represent the living, breathing person who wrote them. Instead, expressing skills, individuality, and outlining the great things the person's done, they're simply a dull recitation of standard phrases and pat descriptions. And this does nothing to help Ed decide who's going to fit in with his company. So therein lies the answer to getting Ed's attention. Creating a living, breathing resume that screams, "Hire me!" You need to tell him about yourself in an interesting way. You need to bring alive on the page and make him curious to meet you. In other words, you have to tell Ed a story. Since the beginning of time, humans have enjoyed stories. Stories help us make sense of the world. We listen as the story begins, we follow it through the middle, and we feel satisfaction when we reach a resolution. Now, a good story is both compelling and memorable. Obviously, you can't just tell any old story. You know, the one about last year in Las Vegas, New Year's Eve? Yeah, that's probably not going to do the trick. You might enjoy it, but it's not going to get you a job. The stories you tell on your resume have to show Ed that you've solved problems in the past, and now the problems you've solved are similar to the ones that he's facing now. If you do that, why wouldn't he interview you? Now, the biggest challenge is knowing which stories to include and which to leave out. You don't want your resume to read like War and Peace, after all. However, both of these challenges get much easier when we stop making one simple and all too common mistake. The mistake is believing that our resume is all about us. Wait, what am I saying? Of course your resume should be about you. Actually, no. Your resume should be all about one person, the hiring manager. Rather, it should be all about providing information that he or she needs to make their decision. They need to find a candidate who can resolve their problems and maximize their opportunities. They're going to respond immediately to resumes that address his key concerns and offer the promise of making big improvements to his current situation. They won't even hesitate. Now, Mary's the perfect candidate, so why doesn't Ed interview her? Mary, who's 25, has been working in social media marketing for the last few years, and currently she's only part of her job. She's actually an executive assistant to the marketing manager, but she wants to make it full-time. She's excited when she sees the posting for Ed's vacancy because she has all kinds of skills that he's looking for. She thinks she's the perfect candidate. She quickly sends off a copy of her resume without any edits because she wants to be first in line for the job. And then she waits. And waits. And waits. Now, eventually she tries phoning, but she's told that HR has already notified all the candidates that are coming in for an interview, and she's not among them. So what went wrong? Well, Mary could have solved all of Ed's problems. She's smart, hardworking, creative, and she's really good at what she does. She would have whipped his social media marketing process into shape within 2 months, and sales would have grown as a direct result. The problem is that her resume didn't show Ed any of that. It didn't tell him a powerful story that addressed his needs. When he reviewed it, he just saw an executive assistant, not a go-getting social media manager. It told a chronological story of Mary's career to date, including the parts of her current job that don't relate to social media or marketing. In fact, as he only had time to skim the resumes and sort them into yes and no piles, he didn't even notice that she had responsibility for social media at her current job. Keep that in mind when you have these big, thick, long resumes. Maybe you should just be highlighting a few points, but we'll come back to that later. But the moral of the story is that when it comes to resume writing, the most important person isn't you, it's the hiring manager. So you need to put yourself in the hiring manager's shoes. You know what you want to tell a story. You know that you want to tell a story with your resume, but which one? There's so many different stories you can tell about your career, and obviously you don't have room to tell them all on a resume. So the answer is that you have to tell the story that most resonates with the hiring manager and directly addresses their needs, their concerns, their work problems, and their crises. This means you need to forget about you for a little while. Instead, focus on the needs of the hiring manager. To do this, picture the hiring manager at your ideal company. Give him a name. Imagine his office. Now think about his situation. What are his fears, concerns? What are his hopes? What are his wishes? What kind of candidate would be the best fit for him? What experience will be important? What skills matter most? What character traits will he value? If you understand the answers to these questions, you'll naturally write a resume that appeals to the hiring manager and to types of companies that you want to work for. The question is what to include and what to omit. It becomes much easier to answer when you understand you're doing it from his perspective. Just keep his needs and concerns in mind. Then you don't need to worry about writing hypey phrases like self-motivated, self-starter, because you simply focus on telling the hiring manager the things that he needs to know. I mean, there's no need for a lot of self-promotion. So, here's the first step. To prepare for what you're going to learn, you need to take stock of where you are now. Imagine yourself in Ed's shoes. Take a good, long, hard look at your resume. Go through the document with a highlighter pen and mark a place where you use a common resume phrase like accomplished manager or highly motivated self-starter. This pinpoints problem areas right up front. Then ask yourself these questions. Is it designed to appeal to Ed, to address his concerns, to make him excited about talking to you? Does it look like and sound different to other resumes he's seen? If you were in Ed's shoes, would you be itching to set up an interview after reading that resume? Now, if the answer to any of those questions is no, don't worry. Just make notes right now about your weaknesses. Also, be sure to note anything you think doesn't work well. It might be a particular phrase or the way you've communicated a skill set, maybe a particular powerful accomplishment you described. I want to give you some general advice right now before we get into the specifics, but if you haven't figured it out by now, now's a good time to talk about it. Resumes should be individually written for positions. If you have one resume you're sending out for everything, well, it's just not going to fly. We're going to talk more about that later, but keep that in mind. Every resume should be tailored toward that particular position. And once again, we'll talk more about that in detail, but start thinking along those lines. Okay. Highlight your transferable skills. Employers are looking for specific experience and qualifications. However, they're also looking for more general skills like communication, flexibility, teamwork. Now, your resume should try to highlight these kinds of transferable skills, as well as your specific work experience. If you've been commended by previous employers for resourcefulness, learning quickly, or providing great service, mention this on your resume. Next, you need to put the vital information near the top. Recruiters in general read the first third of your resume, and then they glance over the rest. Then they make a snap decision as to whether to examine your application in more detail, or to move on to the next one. And this is why important information needs to be near the top. What are the main things the recruiter is looking for? Do they stand out on your resume? Sometimes a vital piece of information, maybe towards the end, for example, in one of your early jobs contained a very relevant piece of experience. If so, add a brief summary near the top mentioning that you have this experience. Next, check your resume on screen and on paper. Most resume submissions these days are electronic, so you need to ensure that it's easy to read on a computer screen. Sometimes documents look very different on a computer, on different computers. Even keep in mind, some people may look at it on a phone, and it's going to be difficult to make it look good on a phone, but keep that in mind. How are they looking at your resume, and how does it look from that perspective? Next, send your resume to a friend and have them look at it on their computer. Your resume may still get printed out and placed on someone's desk, but print out your own copy before submission. Check it. Make sure it comes out the way you intended and that it doesn't exceed the recommended page count. Next, I shouldn't even have to say this, but I'm going to say it. Don't include any, well, duh statements. Statements such as references available on request or available for immediate interview, they're not necessary. They're pointless, they're assumed, and they're wasting space and time. You may have been taught to include these generic phrases, but they don't add anything to your resume, and they just waste space. Recruiters assume you have references and that you will attend an interview. And what other generic phrases do you have on your resume? Go through your resume and delete anything that's obvious. Instead, use the space to offer more details about yourself and why you are the best candidate, why they can't live without you for this job. Next, make your resume readable for non-experts. Not everybody who handles your resume is going to be an expert in your field. In fact, the first person who sees it is probably going to be an HR person, and they probably have no real expertise in your field. So try to use language that's as straightforward as possible. You can quickly test the readability of your resume by getting a friend or relative to read it and see if they understand what you're trying to say. And do this even if you're sure that an industry expert will be reading your resume. Because people have very little time to read documents like this, and clear, precise English is always preferred to dense shop talk, industry colloquialisms, acronyms. Make sure you zoom in on your relevant experience. Your resume needs to establish you as a candidate with the right set of skills to do the job. Experience that's relevant to the job needs to be front and center. For example, if you're applying for an IT role, your employment history needs to highlight any IT-related experience you have. Talk about how you've had to use Microsoft Office or CRM system before you talk about anything else. Even if the relevant experience was only a small part of your job, you can still highlight it. Relevant experience is what the recruiter is really interested in, so make sure it's prominent in your resume. Make it clear if you've ever been promoted. A promotion is worth bragging about, as it shows that your old boss really believed in you. However, the structure of the employment history can sometimes obscure your job progression. So if you have enough space, it's okay to list 2 separate jobs in your employment history, one before your promotion and one after. If not, the more senior job, add some bullet points about your promotion. For example, you may want to try hired as a cashier, promoted to duty manager after 6 months, or something to that effect. Write numbers in the correct format. Number formatting, it's a small detail, but small details can mean the difference between success and failure. The general rule for spelling is spell the numbers 1 through 9 and use numerals for 10 and higher. When starting a sentence with a number, spell it out. In a list of numbers, use numerals. The most important thing, as always, is just be consistent. It looks bad when you mix styles. For example, say I worked 9, the digit 9, and then 5 spelled out each day. Make sure keywords appear in your resume. Just think about beating the robots. A computer will most likely scan your resume before human eyes ever see it. The computer can look through your resume for certain keywords such as Excel, manager, or the name of a particular qualification. When applying for a job, you first think about going through the computer stage. This means figuring out which keywords are required. Now, most of the keywords will appear in the job ad itself, so you know what they're looking for. They told you. The essential skills or necessary experience section is often just a list of keywords. Make sure those keywords are in your resume. Now, of course you need to insert these naturally. A human at some point is going to read your resume, and they need to be able to make sense of it. But go through your resume and find the best place to insert the keywords. For example, if Excel is a keyword, and one of the lines in your employment is used several software systems, instead change that to read used Excel and several software systems. But make sure you research which keywords to use before writing your resume. I'm saying go through the job ad carefully. It's telling you what they want. You have to regurgitate it back to them in your resume. Another well-done statement: proofread, proofread, and proofread again. You get one chance to make a first impression. A small error in your resume or cover letter can say to a recruiter that you're sloppy and that you have low attention to detail. Use proofreading tools to help. Many professional resume writers fine-tune their content and eliminate minor grammatical errors using Grammarly. Remember that no spell checker or proofreading tool can spot a factual error. If you say you graduated on February 30th or you left your last job in 2028, you look silly. You have to examine your resume in fine detail before submitting. Ideally, get somebody to look at it for you. Have somebody else proofread it. They'll probably find things you never thought about. Okay, next, be objective about what to include. You may have to cut things from your resume in order to make everything fit, but what should go? The answer is anything that's not directly related to the job for which you're applying. Now, this might mean leaving out some information that you're proud of or that you'd like the recruiter to know. But you have to be ruthless. Go through every line and ask, is this essential for this application? If you can't be sure that it's 100% essential, consider cutting it out. With regard to formats, I recommend two types, and it's going to be a little difficult to... These are going to be in the workbooks, but let me just go through it quickly, so hopefully you'll get the idea. First is called the Harvard Business School. That's the traditional, simple, to the point. You can't go wrong with this format. Second is more contemporary. It allows you to put in much more information, and more importantly, it allows you to highlight your, I'll call them big 6 core skills. And this is going to allow you to frame your interview and showcase your strengths. In general, I recommend you stick to one page, but if you truly have significant and interesting experience that you want to use to capture the interviewer's attention, you can go to a second page. Just keep in mind it's unlikely they're going to read it. Remember, your resume is not a list of everything you ever did. It's a story and an outline, which should be a springboard to get the interviewer to allow you to talk about your strengths. Your resume should be a hook, so it gets the interviewer, the human resource person, to want you to come in and tell you more about yourself. You don't need to put every detail about yourself in there. Okay? Now, there are certain categories of words I'm going to give to you, and once again, go through the workbooks for this. I'm not going to go into this in detail right now, but certain kinds of adjectives that are, I call them, platinum impact words. And depending on the function, some of the functions are like achievement, gave opinion, made better, managed. We've got all kinds of words that are powerful words. So once again, look in the resource center for that. I don't want to go through that in detail now, because there's just a lot of, and I've got plenty of categories. There's categories: design, teaching, finance, accounting, system. So anyway, got plenty of help for you there. Now, in your resume and also in your cover letter, when you say things, make sure you say it the proper way. I'm going to give you a couple of examples here of successful language. Things like ultimately having the impact of, leading to, created the first, changed the way, we adopted across the organization. These are powerful phrases that get people's attention. Some examples of maybe some good resume phrasing. If you might naturally say, I helped develop an iOS app for a group of scientists, a better way to say it would be, collaborated with a team of scientists to develop an iOS application for some organization that had a successful launch date of blah, blah, blah. Another example is you might say, or you may have traditionally said, I raised $5,000 for a disaster relief fund. Instead, why don't you try saying something like, spearheaded a $5,000 fundraising effort to assist victims of some disaster by promoting the message through blah, 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 and making direct appeals to blah, blah, blah potential donors. Saying the same thing, but one is just much more powerful, much more impactful. Give you one more. No, a couple more. I originally did research on the effect of gender in hiring decisions. Instead, why don't you try, performed original research on the effect of gender in hiring decisions by collecting, analyzing, and summarizing X amount of data points to assist in research led by Dr. whomever. How about this one? You might say, I organized and promoted concerts. How about successfully planned, promoted, and coordinated X amount of concerts, negotiating with artists, local media, and venue owners to produce events and consistently attract X number of attendees. Something like that. Okay. Now, here's some ideas for you. Dropping off resumes at ideal firms, even if no openings are listed. It's a simple strategy for outgoing people. Just drop by the office, meet a few people, and who knows, you might even meet a CEO in the elevator. This is most likely to be successful if you're targeting small or medium-sized companies. Larger firms, probably not going to work as well. Also try to connect with recruiters at high growth companies. A quick internet search for terms like fastest growing companies in X field will often yield a list that's going to help identify companies that are growing and thusly likely to be hiring. Now, once you have the list, use LinkedIn to target a few people at the firm and send them a connection request. Alternatively, you can always find other ways to network with these people, like direct mail connections or attending one of their product demonstrations. Propose a mini consulting project for a few ideal firms. If you're confident in your abilities to work alone and make an impact, you can have a good connection with the target firm. It might be a good idea to propose a mini consulting project. It's especially effective with startups and medium-sized firms. For example, if you're a Java engineer, maybe offer to build them a cool little web application to show them your skills. You might not get paid, but you'll build your portfolio, and who knows, maybe you'll get a job. Another idea is reaching out to former professors for job leads. I mean, it's pretty basic. Think about professors who are connected to the business community, and reach out to them. Oftentimes, especially if they consult for non-academic organizations, employers will ask these professors for connections with exceptional students, and you want to make sure your name's on that short list. Now, here's a couple of traditional methods for sourcing opportunities. Of course, using internet-based job boards, source open opportunities. Hold on a second. Sorry about that. Another one is to target trade journals, business journals, unique job boards. Another, maybe connect with alumni through LinkedIn or university. And LinkedIn, we're going to talk at length about that in another section, but this is the best networking tool for a lot of reasons, and you can do a lot of different things through it. Next, attend meetups with other professionals at events. I mean, if you're outgoing and you're good in person, print up some personal business cards without any firm on it, but with your contact information. And attend local professional networking events or even fun meetups, but just get out there. Next, build a list of target firms and visit their career page. I mean, it's a pretty straightforward strategy, but instead of looking at Indeed or waiting for something like that, go directly to the firm's page, see what types of jobs they offer, and see if you're a fit. And every now and then you might even find, wow, this is exactly what I'm looking for. This is great. Another thought is to search for rotational program opportunities with larger firms, especially if you're a recent graduate with good grades. Rotational program can be a great start to a career. These programs are competitive and usually offered only by larger firms, but they're worth a shot if you're qualified. You can usually find them by doing a bit of research on the web. Now, work with headhunters, agency recruiters. Working with agency recruiters is a great way to find opportunities that aren't publicly listed. If you don't have a lot of work experience, look for tempting opportunities, especially those that have a chance of converting into full-time jobs. If you have some experience, try to build a relationship with a good headhunter and let them know your progress as you hunt for a job. Usually these headhunters have many candidates and they appreciate a good candidate. So if you keep them in the loop, that's a great source. And finally, volunteer somewhere that makes sense. Volunteering can yield skills and contacts. If you're in the nonprofit world especially, volunteering can be a good use of your time. Try to target organizations that have solid funding and are more likely to be able to hire you. Remember, a pessimist sees the difficulty in every opportunity. An optimist sees the opportunity in every difficulty. So hopefully this has been helpful. I know it's a lot of information, and you really need to go through both of the workbooks on here, the template workbook and the resume writing workbook. But if you do, you're going to be the most prepared person for this. So we are going to improve your probability of getting a job by X amount. So go through the workbook. As always, if you have any questions, you can reach me, Joe at platinummmethodcoaching.com. I hope you found this enjoyable. I hope you found this useful, and I will talk to you next time. Have a great day.